Hello, my darlings, and welcome back to my channel. For those of you who are new here, my name is Miranda, and I am the Enchantress of Avalon. Now, I do want to note that I was at a concert last night, and there was a lot of screaming, so if my voice is off, that's why. Just a little side note. So, today's video is going to be a bit of a fun one. It is just me talking about how much I love 90s witchy media. Films and TV specifically, although I do love some 90s witchy books, and one of the media properties I'm talking about started as a book. So, the 90s were that perfect time to have this resurgence of witchy media. You know, there was all of this anti-witch and fear and hysteria going on with like that whole satanic panic thing back in the 80s. So finally, in the 90s, that had abated, and we got this resurgence in the witch. The witch never really goes away, though, right? She's always here, lurking, waiting, biding her time to become prominent again. And in the 90s, we just saw so much of this. And it all started, really, if we want to talk about specifically the 90s, with Hocus Pocus, which came out in 1993. This is my Hocus Pocus tarot deck, which was a gift from one of my very best friends in the world, Daisy. And it's an adorable tarot deck. It's such an awesome little novelty thing to have. And it's just beautiful. It's a very beautiful deck. So I did want to display it. It's always in the background of my videos, but talking about witchy 90s cinema and such, gotta start there. Hocus Pocus, again, came out in 1993 and introduced the world to the Sanderson sisters. And I adore that movie so much. I watch it multiple times a year, and I think I'm one of the few people who actually really enjoyed the sequel. No hate if you didn't like the sequel, please, in the comments. I loved it, though. I thought it was a very, very sweet follow-up to the original and showed some character depth that I really enjoyed getting to see. Now, what other witchy media properties are there in the 90s? Well, Sabrina the Teenage Witch and The Craft both came out in 1996, and they gave us two different aspects of witches. There was the darker aspect shown in The Craft, where they're actually using their magic to manipulate things and mess with people's lives. Although the intent wasn't necessarily to cause as much harm as they did, but it is a good lesson on be careful when working with magical forces. And it's just such a beautifully done film. Sabrina, on the other hand, showed us this very fun-loving, I can just point my finger and magic happens aspect of witches. And that's what most of us grew up with. If you were growing up in the late 90s, is, oh, this is witches. This is the fun, lighthearted side of witches, right? And the character had been around since the 60s, but she gained just insane popularity in the 90s with the Melissa Joan Hart television series. And again, would eventually be adapted into the Netflix Chilling Adventures of Sabrina series, which I also do really love. But different aspects of Sabrina, not the same Sabrina. And that's good. We need things to grow and change over time. Now, the next one I want to mention is, because I'm just going to go chronologically, would be Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Because Willow is one of the most iconic witch characters you can find. She is this meek and mild, girl at the beginning, but as she starts developing and cultivating her magic, she becomes this utter powerhouse, which I really love seeing. Her character growth and evolution is just so incredible over the course of that whole series. And she's also just this really lovable person. Like, you want to be friends with someone like Willow, which again made the witch in the 90s a very relatable character. She was someone that you could be friends with, that reminds you of your friend, or someone that reminds you of yourself. Which brings us to the final two things I'm going to talk about. One is a film, one is a movie. Both came out in 1998. And of course, one is a film, one is a television series. Both came out in 1998. The film is, of course, Practical Magic, one of my all-time favorites. It's witchy comfort food for the soul, and the whole look of the movie is just absolutely stunning. And the other, of course, would be Charmed, premiered in 1998 as well. And Charmed gave us the badass witchy fighters. They were going to vanquish the demons, but also wanted to focus on their own personal development and focus on their love lives. And it was okay to want all of these things. It wasn't just you're the good girl or you're the bad girl. It was you could be multifaceted. And actually all of these witch characters were multifaceted, and that's what attracts us to witches in cinema, on television, is this ability to alchemize many different aspects into a whole, right? And obviously over the last several years, we've had that yet another resurgence in the popularity of witchy cinema and television, which I'm so grateful for. I love all the witchy stuff. Just, keep it coming. Of course, some of it is good, some of it is bad, but the stuff in the 90s, there's so much nostalgia attached to it. It's certainly influenced so much in terms of what we consider witchy fashion and different aesthetics that we consider magical and witchy. And we see that in each of these different media properties that I've mentioned today. How many people have been at least a little inspired by the Sanderson sisters, especially if you're doing a witch Halloween costume, but even just in day-to-day life? If you're more adventurous like myself, you're going to be inspired even in day-to-day life to pull in aspects of that. Let's pull in velvet, let's pull in these color palettes, etc., etc. And Willow gave us a more demure and sweet looking witch character. She was kind of geek chic turned witchy, which is very fun. I'm looking at my notes to make sure I don't miss characters. The girls from The Craft gave us this Catholic schoolgirl with an edge kind of look, but the main character in The Craft actually had a much more earthy style outside of school, and it's something that showed that she was a little bit different from the other girls. And then, of course, Sabrina epitomized 90s fashion in every way, shape, and form for the beginning of that series. You could just check mark everything 90s fashion that she just was completely on trend for. And then, of course, Charmed, the early seasons of Charmed were in the 90s, and we had a lot of the velvet dresses, the celestial patterns, the crop tops. That the entire series, crop tops were a big thing. which were a huge 90s fashion staple and have become ingrained in the witchy aesthetic as well. And finally, Practical Magic. The clothes in Practical Magic are probably some of the greatest costumes that are really wearable. They're comfortable, but they're still really, really pretty, and you would feel good wearing those things. So I felt I had to end out this short little video discussing the influence on fashion, because the 90s witch links into witchy looking fashions to this day. And of course, the 90s witch fashions were rooted a little bit in really old school stuff when we look at like Hocus Pocus, for instance, but mostly rooted in the 60s and 70s aesthetics that had trickled down and become popular again. And it's no surprise that often lumped in with these looks is that rock and roll queen herself, Stevie Nicks, who of course I also absolutely adore. And I think all of this has just churned into this nostalgic aesthetic of the 90s witch. And I hope as spooky season is approaching, getting closer to Halloween and to Samhain, that you too will be diving deeper into all the fun 90s witch nostalgia stuff, as I will. So I do hope that you have enjoyed this video. If you have, please do like, comment, subscribe, and even check out my blog, whiterosebabylon.life, for more content. And I do once again apologize for my voice being so strained. So have a very wonderful week, everyone. Bye now.